Hello, Bucs fans, and welcome to Hear the Cannons. I am your host, Colin Hallboom, and I am joined by the boss that runs the show over at BucsGameday, none other than our publisher, Logan Robinson, who is down at Raymond James Stadium. And as you all know, I'm sure most people watching this are well aware, the Buccaneers fell in depressing fashion to the Baltimore Ravens by a final score of 41-31. They showed a little bit of fight at the end, but it may have been a bit too much of a fight because unfortunately the news coming out of Tampa Bay, of course, is the loss of Chris Godwin in what was apparently a very gruesome injury. It sounds like, without any professional medical diagnosis, a season ender. Logan, do you have any info on the specifics of that injury? I saw you posted a video. What can you tell us about the unfortunate circumstances surrounding Chris Godwin's injury with less than a minute left in the game?
Yeah, less than a minute, which I'm sure we'll discuss later, and I know y'all will too as the week goes on over at BucsGameday.com. But, I don't have any kind of update. We have our guys, River and Caleb, there at the presser with Todd Bowles and Baker Mayfield, and they'll be jumping into the locker room too. So we'll see if they get any intel on Chris Godwin's injury. But just from the press box alone, a lot of the beat members go down early to go to the presser because, like you said, it was under a minute. So not a lot of people there except for me and a few others. And our Bucs game day crew was there. And, at that point, you're kind of wrapping up stuff like you are, Colin. We're getting ready to edit your recap to put out and publish on the site. And then we see Chris Godwin go down. We thought maybe this is a second stringer, third stringer out there. There's an injury. But then it's your top player on offense, you could say, throughout this whole entire season. And then whenever you see the reaction from the players on the field, you see Baker Mayfield down, almost down to his knees. You got Jalen McMillan. We could hear through the mic because the refs were talking about stopping the time. You can hear Jalen McMillan saying some explicit words, and just the rest of the team. You could kind of hear through those speakers up there in the press box, not really happy that Chris Godwin was out there on the field this late in the game. But, the entire team, a lot of that offense just down and heartbroken because what they saw on the field immediately after suffering what seemed like a pretty gruesome and severe leg injury, probably in that ankle area. I know some videos have been posted, but just a really sad way to end a game after, you're at garbage time here. This game's over. It's been over. And you're still throwing out your starters and you're still putting guys in situations. No, even after Chris Godwin's injury, you're still putting Baker Mayfield at risk with a handful of other guys still passing the ball. I just feel like that was it's overboard. And for it to happen to Chris Godwin, who a lot of the people here in Tampa, along with me, great with the media and having a phenomenal season, one of the top in the league. It's heartbreaking to see and interested to see what the team says in regards to what the injury entails and what it's going to look like further for Chris Godwin.
For sure. And as Chris Maley says on YouTube, when the TV crew refuses to show a replay, you know it was bad. And I haven't even watched it yet. I don't want to. I'm too indebted to Chris Godwin for everything he's given this organization, and I think I probably speak for a lot of Bucs fans when I say that. I mean, let's consider the circumstances of this scenario. Chris Godwin, really, this has felt like his first season where he's really back after working his way for 2 full years following what was a gruesome knee injury versus the Saints a few years back. And he's in a contract year, no less, which certainly complicates things on his end, of course, primarily in his family's, but for the Buccaneers as well. But I want to focus, and by the way, folks like Chris Mail here, feel free to get your comments in. I want to know what you guys think. Like Logan mentioned, there's obviously some questions in hindsight about whether Chris Godwin should have been on the field. It's kind of a double-edged sword. I think maybe some people think, hey, no quitting this team, like their quarterback Baker Mayfield, you play to the end, and that's the type of guy Chris Godwin is. Or was it a needless injury that could have been avoided if he was on the bench, So really curious to hear what people think. And while you're at it, make sure you are subscribing to our channel here. But yeah, Logan, what I want to know is is the word catastrophic too dramatic of a word to describe this injury? Because let's just try and get our heads around the fact of how unfortunate this is for Chris Godwin. For this football team, he is a core piece, as you mentioned, one of the best in the league this year. Yards after catch, touchdowns, all that. Is this catastrophic for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who have depended on Chris Godwin and their offense so much this season?
I think it is, because we just saw your other star wide receiver go out with an injury with a hamstring, and that looks like it could be a long time kind of injury of recovery there, because once again it seems like a hamstring injury for Mike Evans. We saw him there go on that deep shot there from Baker Mayfield and almost came down with it, but just the way that he was probably running, hindering it a little bit more. And then also, too, the way that he landed and the Baltimore Ravens player, while he was trying to tackle him, hit that same leg as well, and just immediate pain from Mike Evans we saw on the TV broadcast. And so now you're in a really brutal spot, because, we can talk depth, we can talk other players, but, just point blank, Tampa Bay Buccaneers are in some trouble right now with what they have in the wide receiver room. It was sort of coming into the season, there was some question marks because you were relying on newcomers to come in, like looking at a true rookie with Jalen McMillan, and then over to with Sterling Shepard coming in, and you're looking at some youngsters like Trey Palmer coming into his second season. You were looking for those guys to be a true number 3 to those top 2. Now you're at a point where you possibly are looking for a new number 1 and a new number 2, a whole new slate of a wide receiver unit because of this injury. And so it's going to be a huge next couple of days for this Buccaneers and Jason Light and Liam Cohen on what they're going to try to do to strategize an offense for Baker Mayfield moving forward, because this has been a strong start to the season for Tampa Bay. You've got a big time NFC South divisional rival coming in town this next weekend. You gotta prepare and try to find some way to fill those holes, and it's not easy to do when it's Mike Evans and Chris Godwin calling.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that Evans situation. I mean, should Godwin have been out there? Like, he probably wanted to be out there, but I have serious issue with Mike Evans being out there, because from the start of the game, even before his touchdown, he did not look right. And that we're talking about a soft tissue injury. Like, it's not a pain tolerance thing when you're dealing with a muscle like his hamstring. And, of course the player is going to want to try and fight to make himself play, and I get it, but you've got the Falcons coming back in, you've already lost one to, who you're facing next week on short rest now. It, to me, feels like that was a little bit of a short-sighted decision to send Mike out there. I mean, sure enough, he goes, and who knows how bad it is. Hopefully it's not too significant. And it's also worth mentioning, Tyke Smith banged up with a concussion. The rookie's been balling out. He's been their best rookie, I would say, pretty clearly. One of the best nickel corners in football, really. He's top 12, according to Pro Football Focus, of all cornerbacks in terms of his grades by PFF. That's how good Tyke Smith has been. So it's, you're right, man. Like, catastrophic is fair in terms of how this game shook out. But
I just wanted to mention too, Colin, on Mike Evans. We were there at practices this week, and it took until the last day, until I believe it was Friday, until we saw Mike Evans put on the jersey, was able to participate. But earlier in the week, he was off and doing his own thing, trying to get ready to be potentially available for this game. And, I was talking about it in training camp with the rest of the staff. I was like, okay, all right, Mike Evans looks really good. The number one question for me always is that hamstring. That's been the only thing that has really plagued him in his career, is that injury with the hammy. And it's something that, we looked into going into the season. Okay, wow, Mike Evans is rolling. Seems like he's fully healthy and stuff. And then you see the Saints game, and he injures it. Who knows what else he's probably dealing with. But it was pretty, like you were saying earlier, you put him into the game. You could tell after that touchdown he wasn't fully healthy, trotting back onto the sideline. A lot of forced stuff, trying to get guys out there. And it's Mike Evans. He takes pride in being available and playing, and definitely when you have a quarterback like Baker Mayfield, everybody wants to play because the kind of energy that he brings to the team. But still, it's a risk that you took, and sadly, Mike might have put himself out for a couple of weeks, and hopefully it's not even worse than that. But that looked like a pretty bad hamstring injury, Colin.
For sure. And we got a interesting comment here from Lucas Pettis watching us on YouTube. Will Liam be the head coach next year? It's an interesting question. And honestly, there's a chance that that's the only way the Bucs get Liam Cohen back. And I recognize that he didn't call a perfect game necessarily today. But the Bucs offense has been humming. It's been a strength of this team. Their defense has given up far too many points, which of course is Todd Bowles' specialty. And then you talk about some of the in-game decisions. He's good for a few awfully peculiar ones over the course of a game. We've already talked about the usage of Baker and Godwin down the stretch. That is totally more of a pick your, like, what it depends on the beholder, what you think there. But like earlier in the game, the Bucs got stopped. They were up, I think 7-0 at the time, and they had 4th and 4. They settled for a short field goal. They were up 10-0 maybe. Anyway, and I thought it was a great opportunity to go for it. I mean, you got a chance here to really make an impact playing let's call it what it is. It's a superior football team. It's a legitimate Super Bowl contender who's absolutely rolling. You got him at home. But in typical Todd Bowles fashion, he settles for the field goal. And I found like too many of those over the course of the last few years, whether or not the Glazers would actually consider doing something as drastic as moving on from Todd Bowles in order to keep Liam Cohen around. I mean, that's a different story. But I do think that Liam Cohen will have opportunities after this year. What do you think, Logan?
I think there will certainly be some opportunities with the Bucs at some point. He can't, whenever you have an offensive coordinator, he's gelling. We just saw with Dave Canales, it's a different kind of game. If you're not fully ready to go and you're ready to perform, and, Dave Canales, you look at him with Carolina, you got to bring a lot of pieces with you and understand the game and the whole sense of things. And yes, he's getting it going here for the Bucs. They're putting up a lot more points than they did in the last few seasons, 100%. But, like you said, there's been some questionable things here and there. But I look at, too, going to that first quarter with them, they almost went up 14-0, but Tristan Wirfs gets called for a holding there that, and I know that was pretty questionable. Saw it on the broadcast, and, Tristan Wirfs never gets called for holds, but I can see from your reaction, not a fan of it, so then you have to go for the field goal. But that negated a 14-0 lead for the Bucs, which, as we know, like you were saying earlier, the Ravens are one of the, if not the best team in the league right now, and certainly offensively the best in football. Any points you'll take, and that's kind of where the momentum swing that we didn't think it would happen happened, and things turned downwards for the Buccaneers, and that and a lot of penalties, man. Penalties really hindered both teams, but definitely the Bucs in this one, in a way that I think Todd Bowles and the rest of the coaching staff is pretty disappointed in.
Absolutely. You're bang on there. And just talking about that Tristan Wirfs holding penalty, I mean, he felt it was as egregious as I did, and most of the Bucs fans in attendance, I'm sure. That was Wirfs' first holding call since week 16 of 2022. And it cost the Bucs dearly there, the timing of that one. I mean, the Ravens got their fair share of Zebra's laundry on the field as well, so you can't act like that's why they lost. But it was definitely an unfortunate penalty called there. There are some positives though. Like, first off, this 41-31 score isn't really indicative. Like, the Ravens own this game, quarters 2 and 3. And the Bucs were able to kind of get some garbage points in there, but they kept playing hard, and that was good. But a couple encouraging things. First off, I think there's a chance that the combination of Bucky Irving and Rachaad White could be the most talented pass-catching duo as far as running backs go in the league. Those boys both got a ton of juice, and I think it was important. Rachaad White today was fantastic. I think he had like 71 receiving yards. He but I think he showed a lot of people, like after last week, people were like, oh, let's move on from Rachaad. It's the Buck and Tuck show. But his value as a receiver is and in pass pro for that matter. He's a fantastic pass protector, best of the three. It can easily get forgotten and with recency bias, and those guys ran all over the Saints. Sure, that was nice, but Rachaad White certainly has a place on this football team, and I thought he played pretty well tonight. What were your thoughts on how Rachaad looked? And of course, Bucky looked electric again.
Yeah, Bucky's fun to watch. It's fun. It's my first game of the season being here in Raymond James Stadium. The chance of anything that Bucky does, it could probably be a 2-yard, 3-yard run from him, and you get the go Bucky chance in Raymond James. It's a fun one to watch. But yeah, he alone is an athlete that, man, he can make you break ankles. He's got a lot of physicality that you wouldn't think from his size. You would think that would be on the shoulders of Sean Tucker or Rachaad White. But yeah, no, that tandem worked. And also too, Sean Tucker. I mean, those three running backs, if Liam Cohen and that coaching staff can get that trio in the right direction of how they want it to go, it's going to change every week with how they're going against defenses and what they want to call. But that whole trio to me impresses me. Definitely when you can get some good blocking in the trenches up front from the Buccaneers offensive line. I look at Sean Tucker where, he just runs north. That's something that, I think a lot of fans got irritated with Rachaad White with, kind of just too much dancing, or you're just looking for something when it's definitely not there. Just go north, man. That's something that Sean Tucker, once he sees green ahead of him, he's gone. But yeah, I think the whole conversation of Rachaad needs to be RB3, get Bucky and get Sean Tucker more carries. I understand that kind of conversation, but Rachaad White to me, with what Liam Cohen's doing offensively, still fits well in what they want to do to get downfield, and definitely as a pass catcher as well. You want to utilize him the best way. I think that's something Liam Cohen has to do, though, because there is definitely still a way to use number one and this offense. And guess what? You're going to have to use him a lot more, because right now you're going to be without likely Mike Evans for a little bit, and sadly, certainly Chris Godwin after these injuries this evening.
You're right. Rachaad White is definitely more of a finesse style of runner, but it complements quite nicely with a north-south runner like Sean Tucker, and then you got Bucky too. So bang on there. Another guy I want to highlight, because I think he deserves some credit, is Cade Otton, man. He had like eight receptions for 100 yards, and I get most of that was in the fourth quarter, but that dude took some licks. Like, I don't know how he got up from those, but like, whatever the concussion protocol is, I'll tell you right now, Cade Otton does not believe in it, because that dude was getting up no matter what and going right back at him. And I thought he just showed a ton of heart down the stretch there, just balling out, like just a gritty performance by the tight end.
Dude, I mean, the physicality and the endurance to take on those shots. Talk about a tight end. That's what comes with the position. You're going to take shots. And sure enough, he did. And Baker loved going to him because he was reliable. Definitely once they had the loss of Mike Evans in this game. But Cade Otton is someone that showed his strength. And like I said earlier, the way that he can withstand these shots and then get right back up, I'm like, there's no way he's not concussed right now. I'm sure they're going to do some tests before he leaves the stadium just to get some double checks on him. But really impressive there. We saw Devin Culp too being active as well, so could have maybe seen him involved. But Cade Otton took the role of that in the pass catching game. I want to go to Baker real quick too, because there's some questions in here, talking about these interceptions and, going to Marlon Humphrey, Baltimore's cornerback, who I think still has it, and it's really impressive for a cornerback coming all the way from Alabama. Baker gave this momentum swing to the Baltimore Ravens, Colin. And that's starting to become a trend. Here. And that's something that's starting to concern me moving forward. I don't know if he's just a little too relaxed. He's taking some shots that he doesn't need to take. He's down here in the end zone. I think that's in the second quarter. It might have been the end of the first. I forget. But taking a shot there in the corner of the end zone, and I think it's second or third down. I think it was second down. You just don't take those, man. Don't give that opportunity to the Baltimore Ravens. And sure enough, it created a big momentum swing for them. And I think that Baker's got to get back on track. He's got to start taking care of the ball better, because it's putting them in a really rough spot, and it's allowing momentum. And games like this, like Colin, like y'all were previewing this week on Here the Cannons, this Ravens offense is going to score. Yes, Todd Bowles and his defense, he's going to send blitzes, whatever. It's Lamar Jackson. They're going to score points. They're the best in the league at it. You've got to take every opportunity to put points on the board, and Baker Mayfield put them in a bad spot to do so. And I think that's what allowed the Ravens to come away with a win, and a convincing win in Tampa.
No, you're totally right. It's an important point to bring up. 5 picks in his last 2 games. I mean, and the difference too between, against the Saints, 2 of those interceptions you could argue were on his receivers, right? It was 1 bad interception, maybe 2 you could argue on his receivers. Tonight, that wasn't the case. Both picks were firmly and squarely on Baker Mayfield's shoulders. And to me, it seems like he's starting to see some of what plagued Baker as a younger quarterback in the league was he would get too panicky, too finicky, look downfield and try and force the issue. I mean, when he threw that first interception, which was right on off the heels of that Mike Evans injury, I could just feel he was pressing, and I was yelling at the TV, don't force it, because it felt like he had so much time. Shout out to that O-line, man. They were giving him a lot of time. He didn't have to. He just climbed the pocket, step back. But with that much time, you start to feel an obligation to make something happen. And I could just see his happy feet, and I could see it happening. And his second interception was even more egregious, trying to force it into Chris Godwin. I think the receiver near him was Palmer or McMillan. They were meant to clear out. Godwin running like a flat corner or an dig route, whatever you want to call it. But there was too many defenders there. There just wasn't something there. I think it might have even been Sterling Shepard, actually, who he would have had if he went over the top. But I think he's just trying to make things happen on his own. And part of being a quarterback in this league is you have to understand it does not work that way. And you need to be able to remain poised and take what the defense gives you, and especially when you have a lead. And the Bucs have blown a lead 2 consecutive weeks now. So that's something we got to keep an eye on with Baker. It is definitely something to worry about. We got a good question here. Do you think McMillan will be better in Godwin's spot? And he's not saying better than Godwin, folks. I'll tell you that right now. And this is Lucas Pettis watching us on YouTube. Make sure you check us out on YouTube. Subscribe, hit the bell, rate and review, all that good stuff. We've had a ton of guests from the Buccaneers on our podcast. And the more support we get from y'all, the more we can keep delivering on that. But in regards to this question here, it's a good one. Because Jalen McMillan, although he's often been operating, on the outside because you got Godwin on the field who's just been eating all season, primarily out of the slot. The fact is, Jalen McMillan is viewed by most draft prognosticators as a guy who is best suited to play in the slot. Many people believe that Jalen McMillan was drafted to be Chris Godwin's incumbent and to take over that spot after this year, under the assumption maybe the Bucs can't afford him, maybe it's time to move on, whatever it is. This injury certainly complicates that discussion even further, but we're going to save that for another day. In the meantime, in the short term, I do think McMillan will be better operating out of the slot. To answer this question, Trey Palmer will likely occupy that wideout position opposite Evans. Once Evans back, that's me operating under the assumption we might see Mike within a few weeks, I hope. But that's me being very optimistic. But yes, I do think McMillan is better suited to occupy that slot within this offense. Won't be in the same gritty way, yards after catch, that Chris Godwin has had so much success this year. But it's more like he's a zone killer. Like he's really crafty, settling into zones, good hands. That's kind of what Jalen McMillan was drafted for. And I think we'll see some more of that depending on the status of those receivers. Yeah, so I don't know if you have any thoughts on McMillan. Like it looked today like it was obvious they were trying to kind of get him in the fold as their wide receiver 3. So I think Liam Cohen has some faith in the kid. What do you think, Logan?
Yeah, we saw some really good signs from him in training camp. A lot of consistency there. Baker, I feel like that was his favorite target throughout. Kind of got into the season. obviously getting the head nod and getting starting reps. But then it kind of slowed down there. You saw Sterling Shepard take his spot a lot in that New Orleans Saints game last weekend. But now you saw, okay, more opportunities going into this game. And I definitely think this kid has potential. I think it's just getting the game down, and he is just a rookie. But now a lot is going to go on his shoulders, and there's a reason why they drafted him fairly early in this class. And he's going to play a lot. The staff thinks very highly of him, and obviously Baker Mayfield does as well. He brings a lot of energy, gritty. He's kind of the perfect pair for Baker. I think of him kind of like Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard also brings that kind of juice. Definitely, if you see him, he's a feisty guy, and I see Jalen McMillan that rubbing off on Jalen McMillan a little bit. Those two are very close in the locker room, but yeah, he's going to have to step up. One last thing from me before we hop out of here, Colin, is this defense got diced up. Bulls got eaten alive from this offense. And a lot of defenses have this season from the Baltimore Ravens and what they've been able to do with Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and, their whole wide receiver arsenal. Bateman went off, and, you saw that big shot there. Zion McCollum missing out on that deep ball and getting beat on that. But it just felt like Mark Andrews and all of these guys were wide the F open in so many ways throughout this game, where it just kind of felt like 7-on-7 at the end of the night. Got to hope that doesn't continue. We saw early on that the Buccaneers were bringing pressure. We saw, Yaya Diaby get that sack. We saw, I believe it was Antoine Winfield Jr. coming around and also getting the sack right after that from Yaya Diaby. But, after that, Todd Monken and the Baltimore Ravens were able to do what they wanted to do against the Bulls. And so that's just something that stood out to me, obviously. But, Todd Bowles in this defense, they got to get back to the drawing board and start getting to the quarterback and start causing some stuff. Got to fix some things. And I know that you're dealing with some injuries right now, but you were able to get a lot of your guys back, and you're still getting eaten alive like we just saw in primetime Monday Night Football.
Yeah, 41, 27, 36. That's the last three games, the amount of points the Buccaneers opponents have put up against Todd Bowles' defense. You're absolutely right. They got abused today. I think they were so focused on stopping the rushing attack of the Baltimore Ravens. It's like they forgot to defend the pass, or they fell asleep a little bit, and they expected the Ravens just to continue to try. But, like Zion McCollum, he's had an amazing year, and he got burned by Bateman on that play. He misread it. I think he didn't expect Bateman to keep on going down the field, and Lamar made him pay. And that's just one example of players getting exposed today. I think there were a number of instances where KJ Britt kind of lost track of his guy over the middle of the field, vacated the center of the field, which is something that David Harrison, friend, like one of our writers here, big contributor for Game Day Media, warned us about with the Ravens having matched up with the Commanders. And we talked about that on our podcast last Wednesday, which, by the way, folks, if this is your first time joining us, make sure you check us out here, the Cannons. Every Wednesday, we preview the upcoming game. So lots of good intel coming in that way. But yeah, Logan, I think we've hit on a bunch of it, and I think it's tough to continue talking more. The big news coming out of this game, and yeah, sure, this loss hurts, but the loss of Chris Godwin is, as we both agreed, catastrophic. That word is not too dramatic, and not just for Chris Godwin, but potentially for this football team. And you can't overlook the fact that Mike Evans went down as well, and he was run out there clearly hurt with a hamstring. Run a guy out there with a hurt hamstring and expect him to be his usual self. Well, don't be surprised if he gets hurt and misses a bunch more games. And that's going to start next week with the Atlanta Falcons coming to town with a really good chance for them to go up 2-0 on the Bucs in the division. So there are a ton of storylines, most of them unfortunately negative, coming out of this game here. But we really appreciate you giving us your time from the field down at Raymond James Stadium. Folks, that is why you stick with Bucs Game Day for this kind of content from the field. Logan, thanks so much, man, for joining us and giving us your insight.
Yeah, thank you, Colin, for having me. Appreciate everybody following us here on YouTube. Like he's been saying throughout the episode, hit the like button, subscribe. These guys do a fantastic job getting you guys prepped for games. I think we got close to 5,000, maybe more than that since I last checked on the preview for this game. So appreciate everybody starting to flood in and give these guys some love. But the show doesn't stop even after losses. We keep rolling. So make sure you stay tuned to BucsGameday.com. Got tons of post-game content after this Buccaneers loss to the Ravens 41-31.
There you have it, folks. So thanks so much for joining us. And until next time, go Bucs.